everyone, it's Hailey and welcome back to a new video. It has been a really long time since I've filmed anything and I apologize for that. I took a little bit of an unexpected break. Things were just really crazy with moving and everything, but finally I'm settled and I'm getting back on a schedule of filming. So today I am doing a recent reads video that is very long overdue. If you haven't seen any of my recent reads videos before, I'm going to be going into my spoiler-free thoughts for all the books that I have read recently. I will have a list down below of what those books are as well as timestamps, so if there's a specific book that you are looking for, you can just click and go right to it. So admittedly, I haven't done a lot of reading so far in 2020, which makes me very sad. I want to get back into a schedule and reading is something I want to include on that schedule. It's just kind of a work in progress right now, but I do have a few books that I have finished that I wanted to give you guys some more in-depth thoughts about. I wanted to start off by really quickly just talking about a couple of books that I read in December actually, which was so long ago it feels like, but really it wasn't that long ago, but everything has just changed since then, so I think that's why it feels like it was forever ago. But as usual, in December, I usually like to focus on Christmassy books, but these couple of books are books that I feel like you could read whenever. They just kind of fit the festive season, but they are year-round reads as well. So first up is 10 Blind Dates by Elston. I actually read this on my 24-hour readathon day, and it took me by surprise with how much I enjoyed it. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was super fun and enjoyable story. It's all about this girl who has just been through a breakup really unexpectedly at Christmas break, and she goes to stay with her grandmother, and there's a bunch of members of her family that are there, like aunts, uncles, cousins, all of that stuff, and they decide that they are going to set her up on 10 blind dates over the course of Christmas break. So she's going on all these dates that were planned by her loved ones, and they are really funny and just it's overall such an enjoyable story. I loved the family aspect. That was probably my favorite element of the story, but I also did like the romance. I think for the most part though, the family was why I was reading it. A lot of times you read about the immediate close-knit family, but having the extended family involved as well was a nice refresher, and like I said, the dates were so funny, and I think this is the perfect Christmas read, but I also think you can kind of read it whenever. The next book is one that I actually gave 5 out of 5 stars, which is something I don't do very frequently, but this book, I just enjoyed it so much, and that is One Day in December by Josie Silver. So I listened to the audiobook for this one, and I like doing that with stories like this is set in England, and I like doing that because then you get to hear the accents, and to me, it just brings the story to life. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Love, Rosie, which I've only seen the movie for, but I liked the movie a lot, and this book was just so much. It's so much angst, and usually I don't like that much angst, but this was just like, oh my god, I loved every single character in it, and I wanted all of them to be happy, and I think, well, there were some things that happened along the way that were a little bit, I just wanted the best for them, and I feel like things did end up working out how I would have liked them to. So the whole concept of this is that she sees him from a bus window, and it's like love at first sight, but then she's in a bus, so like she never sees him again, but then they end up meeting again, but it is when her best friend ends up introducing him as her new boyfriend. So you are following, I don't even know how many years it is, but years and years and years across their lives as they connect, as they try and figure out like what is going on with their relationship. So there's just a lot of elements to this story, but it was so good. I really loved it, and it's definitely one where you can read it whenever because Christmas isn't a huge part of it, although a lot of parts it does take place at Christmas time and around New Year's and stuff like that. You can read it whenever. I think it's across 8 years. I can't really remember. I have a terrible memory when it comes to books. But this was just a really pleasant surprise because I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to feel about it, but I enjoyed it. So now getting to the books that I actually read in 2020, I didn't read a single book in January. I didn't finish one rather, but the first day of February I did end up finishing 2 books, and February I ended up reading 4 books total, which makes me so sad because my February TBR had way more than 4 books, but March we're gonna come in hot and we are going to redeem ourselves. I don't know why I'm talking like I'm more than one person, but I'm going to redeem myself for my Goodreads goal because I really do want to try and read 100 books, or at least like more than 65, which is what I read last year. I want to read a lot. It's just, oh, I've been so lazy. I should be a little bit more coherent about these books than I was about the first two, because the first two I was just going off the top of my head. These I actually have some notes that I had written down while I was reading them. First is The Right Swipe by Alisha Ray. This story follows Rhiannon, and Rhiannon has left her old job on some pretty rough terms, but she took off on her own and she set up this very popular dating app that's kind of women focused, and she set it up with her best friend by her side. Now she's a go-getter, so as she's looking to expand her business, she wants to buy this company that the owner has recently passed, and she's hoping to acquire their business. So it turns out that the spokesperson for that business is a former one-night stand who ended up ghosting her, and he is also an ex-NFL player. So obviously there's a little bit of tension between Rhiannon and Samson, but they realize that they might have to both work together to get what they want. I give this a 3 out of 5 stars overall. I picked this actually for a book club that I do with a couple of friends of mine. We read adult romance books, and it was my month to pick, and this is the book that I picked. And I don't think it was a bad pick, but my problem with it, I think, was that I wasn't sure what the story was. I wasn't sure what the conflict was, because for the most part, conflict would be introduced but then resolved very quickly. So it would be introduced on one page, and then a couple of pages later it was like, oh, okay. So there wasn't really that much drama, and I think that that's what I was looking for. I don't think that the relationship was enough to keep me invested in the story, so it wasn't bad by any means. It was just kind of average and not really a book that would stand out to me. One of the weirdest things is that the big kind of plot line or plot twist at the end, I felt like had very little foreshadowing, and I didn't realize that that was the main plot line, which kind of to me presents a little bit of a problem with the narrative. That being said, I did like the ending and where it went. It was a feminist twist on your typical romance story, and I found it very empowering in a lot of the things that it discussed. However, I think it did tend to get a little bit soapboxy at times. This is told in alternating viewpoints between Samson and Rhiannon, and I found myself liking Samson's portions a little bit more because I think it was a bit more clear what the plot line was. I knew that his plot line was kind of focusing on the NFL thing and discussions of concussions. That was a rhyme, but I think that's something important to be discussed, and I was surprised that it was brought up in a book like that, but I did like that. I just think that there was kind of a lot thrown in because it did kind of come out of left field. That was a little bit of maybe a football pun. I don't play football, so I don't know. I liked that it was dual perspective and that it was dual plotline, and her plotline was mostly about acquiring Matchmaker, but I found that plotline was a little bit shaky. And I wish, and Matchmaker is the app that she's trying to buy, but I wish that it had been a bit more solid. I think where other characters came into that plotline, I wanted it to excel more, but I don't think that the side characters were built up enough for me. I enjoyed the fact that online dating was the focus of this story. I think that there should be more romances that are like that. Maybe there are. If you know of any, please suggest them to me. But the relationship between Samson and Rhiannon, like I said, the conflict was just resolved so quickly that there's no tension. There was no working for that relationship. And while I do like to see the characters together, I kind of like them to work for it a little bit to come together in the end. So because it was so easy, I think it ended up being a little bit cheesy. That once again rhymed. What is happening to me right now? So it was a sweet romance, but it was a little bit too sweet. I will say this was very steamy. It had a lot of sex scenes, more than I think in other adult romances that I've read. I think the kiss quotient might have more, I'm not entirely sure, but they were very descriptive as well. So that was interesting. I thought they were well written and the book was well written overall. I think my main issue is just the fact that the main conflict came in so late and there was no conflict carried throughout. It just kind of was weird because of that. Next is The Toll by Neal Shusterman. So this is the finale to the Scythe trilogy. I'm obviously not going to be able to go super in depth to this one without spoiling it since it is the end of a series, but I highly recommend that you read this trilogy. However, this was my least favorite of them, but that's not a bad thing. So I feel like a lot of people think when I give a book 3 out of 5 stars that I didn't like it, and it doesn't mean that I didn't like it. Like, I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars, which means I enjoyed it. It just wasn't great. It was good, not great. For perspective on that, I gave the other two books a 4 out of 5 stars, possibly a 4.5. So I love the series, but this just kind of was a letdown for a couple of reasons. One, this is very long. It's very long and it's very dense, so it took me forever to get through, even with listening to the audiobook. And I love Neal Shusterman's writing. I think he always keeps you on the edge of your seat, and it is an action-packed book, but it really makes you work for it because you're getting a lot of information thrown at you, and since there are all these ends that need tying up, it's a lot, and you're trying to keep track of all of this, as well as all of these characters. So there's some new characters introduced, some characters that were introduced in previous books that come more to the forefront than they were before, and I feel like because of that, the main two characters that you start off with in the first book, Citra and Rowan, they kind of fell on the back burner a little bit, which for me was a bit disappointing. I kind of wanted them to be more on the forefront, but I did enjoy their portions and getting to see where their story ended up going. Now that being said, the character development in this series is wild. From the first book to this book and even the second book, you get to follow that development in their arcs, and especially Citra and Rowan, it just like blows my mind. Where I struggle with this book is because it was so long. So like I said, there was a lot of action, but in between those lulls in the action, you were just information overload, and because of that, I just got a little bit bored at times. I felt like the ending was dragged out, and I was kind of like, okay, I get it, like, wrap it up. And it doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy it, it's just my least favorite of the series, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I thought the ending was very interesting. I read it over a couple of times to like really get it, but it was a great series overall. Definitely, if you're looking for a new sort of sci-fi series, check out this trilogy because I think you will be pleasantly surprised. Speaking of pleasant surprises, next is the Bromance Book Club by Lyssa K. Adams. This is about Gavin Scott, whose marriage is in major league trouble. Literally, I have read that first line of the synopsis so many times because it makes me laugh. Nashville legend, second baseman, Gavin Scott's marriage is in major league trouble. Like, that was what kept me off from this book, but I'm glad that I gave it the chance because I thoroughly enjoyed it. But he's struggling with his marriage because he found out that his wife has been faking her orgasms for their entire marriage, so he is just kind of wounded by that. He acts like an ass about it and is like, he's just egotistical, and he realizes that after, so now he's trying to fix it. He wants to fix his marriage, and in order to do that, he joins this book club. It's a bunch of Nashville's top men, it's athletes, businessmen, all of that stuff, and they get together for this book club where they read romance books, and specifically they are currently reading a Regency novel. It's called Courting the Duchess, I think? Courting the Countess. So they read this steamy Regency novel, and they call them guides because they use them to try and treat their wives as best as they possibly can, and that is kind of what hooked me. It seemed really fun, and it was lots of fun. So I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was surprisingly wholesome. I liked the fact that it was different than any other adult romance that I've read before because you didn't have the fight for the couple to get together. It was fighting to fix an old relationship that had fallen apart but didn't need to end. So it just ended up being really surprisingly sweet, especially the moments between them and their kids. They have twin girls, which I'd never read an adult romance where there are kids involved, so I wasn't entirely sure about that, but those were some of my favorite moments. They were really cute, and I liked how the kids got involved in it, and it was just very wholesome because of that. There are excerpts from the Regency novel that they are reading as well that you have in here before some chapters, and then they tie directly into the following chapter, and I thought that that was awesome. It brought the book club to life and was just a really enjoyable part of it. I love the fact that he kept on calling the main male character in the book like Lord, I don't know, Fuzzy Pants. Like, he would call him like different things, which was really funny, and it was such an easy, quick, and a breeze to read. Like any romance, there were some parts where it was a little bit cheesy and a little bit corny, and specifically this one, it was kind of like the characters became unrealistic. There were some things thrown in your face, a little bit like The Right Swipe, but way worse than that. But it didn't take away from my enjoyment. It just kind of was like, sometimes I was like, okay, it's good, we can move on now. I think this ended up being kind of a family romance overall though, which surprisingly I enjoyed, but I also enjoyed the enemy character, and he's actually going to be the focus of the next book, which I'm not surprised by at all, but I'm really excited for it because I think his story will be fun to read. It also follows the main female character from this, Thea, her sister, Liv. She's the love interest in the following book, so I'm very excited to read that. But Thea herself and even her sister, they were both kind of annoying characters a little bit, but I don't think I was as annoyed by her as a lot of other reviews that I've seen. People like hate her, and even when my friends read this and thought she was really annoying, I don't think I found her as annoying as other people. Like, I get it, I get why she would be annoying, but I don't know, I just wasn't that annoyed by her. The main thing that kind of led to the downfall of this relationship was a lack of communication, and that's something that kind of frustrates me in romance books, the lack of communication, like just speak. But I think in this case, since that kind of happened beforehand and it was something that was being worked on throughout the novel, it didn't bug me as much. I was rooting for the couple the entire time and just had such a fun time reading this, so I'm really excited for the next book, and it was definitely a very pleasant surprise. On the other hand, this next book was a bit of a disappointment, and by a bit I mean it was a major disappointment, and that is The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary. I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. I listened to the audiobook for it. A lot of people had told me, oh, maybe if you try the audio you might like it, but that is exactly the route I went, and it just didn't do it for me. So this follows Tiffy and Leon, and Tiffy has just been through a bad breakup and she's looking for somewhere to live, but everywhere is too expensive, so she agrees to this flat share with Leon. So Leon works at the hospital, he's working midnight, so he only needs the apartment during the day, and then she can have the apartment during the night and on weekends. So they agree to that, and they start communicating via post-it notes, just about simple little things, but then they start to have a relationship of their own. I was expecting more romance from this, and maybe that's where it fell flat for me, but this is an opposites attract sort of romance. So Tiffy is very zany and quirky and out there. She kind of reminds me a little bit of Hazel from Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, which is one of my favorite adult romances. It's the one that kind of introduced me to all of it. But I did like her as a character. I really enjoyed the characters as individuals. On the other hand, we have Leon, who's reserved, quiet, and mellow, and I liked him as a character as well. But together, there just wasn't really the chemistry that I had wanted there to be. I don't think there was enough chemistry for it to carry through the little notes that they were communicating through. I thought the concept sounded really adorable. I was very excited for it. You guys might remember from, I don't remember what video it was I was talking about it, but like, I was so excited about it. I think it was my book haul, but it just, the execution didn't end up doing it for me. I think part of it is because I was expecting a little bit more active romance, and a lot of it was passive, but there wasn't really the angst there that I think could have helped it along. It was just kind of like nothing. So I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit bored, and I hate saying that because I know so many people have loved this book, but just because I didn't like it doesn't mean you won't. Like, I don't know, it wasn't for me. A lot of people who haven't liked this book is because of the writing, specifically of Leon's portions. And this is dual perspective between Tiffy and Leon, and Leon's chapters are told, or written rather, in a very interesting way. They're kind of, it reads like a script almost, like stage commands. There's a lack of grammar and punctuation, and it just kind of is like going through like, I did this, then I did this, then I did that. It actually took me a little bit to realize that that was what was off with it. Since I was listening to the audiobook, I was like, something sounds different, but I was like, oh, it's because he's like listing his actions. So you got his personality through that. So that wasn't a reason why I didn't like it. I thought that was interesting and a method that added to the story. It was kind of using form to mimic function. Is that what I'm trying to say? Oh no, my brain is just off right now. You can tell I haven't filmed in a long time. But my point is, that wasn't an issue for me. I thought it was interesting, but I do understand why some people wouldn't like that. I think ultimately the storyline just wasn't enough for me, and this was a very, very long book that didn't really need to be that long. One of the things I did like about this was the exploration of a past emotionally abusive relationship. I thought that that was well done, but do be aware that might be triggering for some people. So that is all for this recent reads video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please let me know if you have read any of these books, your thoughts on them, if you loved them and I hated them, or you hated them and I loved them. Either way, I would love to know your opinion. But once again, thank you guys for being so patient with me over these past couple of months. I only went 10 days without uploading, but I know it feels like a long time because I am pretty consistent with my uploads and I always have been, but I'm going to try and get back to that. I'm working on it. I'm filming a bunch today, so I should be able to. Fingers crossed. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video soon. Bye!